Welcome to our tutorial here on using the unit circle to evaluate basic trig functions. We're going to look at a total of 6 of these items, the first 3 of which are pictured on the screen. First thing that we discussed when looking at this is we want to take the input, the angle, and identify that location on the unit circle. And then we're going to look at whether we want the x-coordinate, the y-coordinate, or some combination of the x and y coordinates. First comment we have here for sine is that we need the y-coordinate on the unit circle for sine. For 11 pi over 6, we're going to look at our unit circle. We're going to identify 11 pi over 6, which is right here. I've highlighted it on the screen. It's at the point radical 3 over 2, comma, negative 1 half. The y-coordinate is negative 1 half at that point. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that the sine of 11 pi over 6 is negative 1 half because of the unit circle. Next up is the cosine of 11 pi over 4. Well, if we come back to our unit circle, 11 pi over 4 is not one of the locations that we see pictured. So we have to determine which of these angles on the unit circle is coterminal to an angle whose measure is 11 pi over 4. Well, to entertain that fact, what we're going to do is realize that coterminal angles, you add or subtract 2 pi to get a different coterminal angle. We want this to get smaller, so we're going to take and subtract 2 pi. Now really what we're doing is ignoring the pi. We're going to leave the pi in the answer, but we're thinking 11 fourths minus 2, which is really 11 fourths minus 8 fourths, and that's going to be 3 fourths. So 11 pi over 4 is coterminal to an angle of 3 pi over 4. That's what we're going to care about on the unit circle. As we go to the unit circle, our angle of 3 pi over 4 is over here. Its point is negative radical 2, comma, positive radical 2. Let's look at the trig function we want. Here we want cosine, which is the x-coordinate. The x-coordinate at that particular point is negative radical 2 over 2. So the answer here is going to be negative square root of 2, all being divided by 2. Next up, 22 pi over 3. That is not an angle specifically listed on the unit circle either, so we are again going to have to find coterminal angles with it. We will keep subtracting 2 pi until we get to one that works. So 22 thirds minus 6 thirds is really what we're doing because 2 is 6 thirds. 22 minus 6 would be a 16 thirds. That's not going to be on the unit circle. Subtract another 6 thirds is going to be 10 thirds. That's still not on the unit circle. Subtract another 6 thirds and we would get 4 thirds. So this is going to be 4 pi over 3, and that will be on the unit circle. Before we transition to look at the unit circle, please be mindful that tangent is the y-coordinate divided by the x-coordinate. So we're going to go to the unit circle. We're going to look at 4 pi over 3, which is now highlighted. We want the y-coordinate, which is negative radical 3 over 2, divided by the x-coordinate, which is negative 1 half. So negative radical 3 over 2, all divided by a negative 1 half. Remember your simplification of fractions. Those 2's are going to cancel. The negatives also cancel in this case, and we're going to get not a negative square root of 3, but a positive square root of 3 is our answer. Now we're going to look at 3 more expressions that we will evaluate. And here they are on the screen. We are going to look at the other trig functions, and we're going to look at angles that maybe are a little bit more involved. So 122 pi over 3. You could subtract 2 pi continually until we get one of the angles that appears on our unit circle. But that isn't going to be fun. So another way to do this is to split the numerator into values that would be divisible by your denominator. In this case, we could split it as I've done on the screen. Now 2 isn't divisible by 3, but 120 is. 120 divided by 3 is going to be a 40 pi. Anytime you've got a multiple of 2 pi, and 40 pi is a multiple of 2 pi, from a coterminal angle standpoint, it doesn't matter. It doesn't impact the angle. So 122 pi over 3 is going to be coterminal with 2 pi over 3 on the unit circle. Also, we want to keep in mind that secant is the reciprocal of the x coordinate. Secant is 1 over cosine. So if we come back to our unit circle, we are looking at 2 pi over 3, which is up here. We want 1 over the x coordinate. The x coordinate is negative 1/2. So we are going to come back to our problem. We want 1 over negative 1/2. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal, and that will be a negative 2. Next problem. 367 pi divided by 4. We could continually subtract multiples of 2 pi, but that's not fun. So we need to kind of split this up a little bit. We could look at this as 366 divided by 4 plus pi divided by 4. Now what we want to do then is take our calculator, or mentally, one or the other, do 366 divided by 4. Unfortunately, 366 divided by 4 does not work out to be a whole number. So I'm going to change this. What would be divisible by 4? How about let's try 364 divided by 4. 364 divided by 4 is going to be 91. That still isn't good because that's not a multiple of 2 pi. So I'm going to back up 4 more and I'm going to go with 360 pi. That 360 divided by 4 is 90 pi, which is exactly what we want. But then 367 would be 360 pi over 4 plus 7 pi over 4. Again, any multiple of 2 pi does not matter from a standpoint of determining coterminal angles. So this is going to be the same as 7 pi over 4. For cosecant, we want the 1 over y. We want the reciprocal of sine. So we'll go back to our unit circle. We are going to 7 pi over 4. We want 1 over the y coordinate, which is negative radical 2 over 2. So we take 1 over negative radical 2 over 2, which is going to be negative 2 over radical 2. And if we rationalize that, it's going to be negative square root of 2. Last but not least, cosine of 425 pi is simple. Odd multiples of pi always coincide with the negative x-axis. We wanted to find the cotangent of 425 pi, which means that we want to determine x divided by y. So if we go back to our unit circle, the x is negative 1, the y is 0. So negative 1 divided by 0, can't divide by 0. The cotangent of 425 pi does not exist. If we keep these things in mind, how to find the coterminal angle, how to interpret our unit circle, and what sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, cosecant all mean in terms of that unit circle point, we should be good to go.